So for 15 bucks, you can go to Harbor Freight and get yourself a set of cab lights for your vehicle. This is what I did, and today I'm going to be talking about how those cab lights are and if they're worth it. So I guess first things first, let's start with the negatives. First, there's no diagram. Typically on higher end cab light kits, they'll come with a diagram and where the lights are going to be mounted on your vehicle. And basically the whole layout was planned by us, which isn't a huge deal. It just takes a little bit more time and there's more room for error. Secondly, the included wire was next to none. Basically, I had enough wire to go to each individual light, and I had about an 8-inch section of wire with an inline fuse, which I'll talk more about later. I had to go buy extra wire so I can ground the switch and so I can actually make it to a 12-volt source. My third complaint would be these included crimps. Basically, the way these work is the hot wire will go on the top here, and then the actual wire from the light will go on the bottom, and you'll have the hot wire going out the other side. It's basically just so you can crimp 3 wires together, and then you just squeeze down this metal piece that's supposed to hold it. It actually doesn't hold it. They're kind of crappy. What I found works better is if you just use a butt connector and get one size bigger than 18 gauge because it's all 18 gauge wire, then you can feed in the cab light wire and the 12-volt signal into one side, then out the other side you'll have the red wire to go to the next light. Fourth, this is a very small thing, but the switch doesn't light up. I mean, the way it looks, I'd expect it to light up. I mean, it just has that look to it. There's a separate ground cable for the switch. As I said, super small, not a huge deal. Probably actually works in my favor because it'd probably be really bright if it did light up, and where I put it, it'd probably be blinding me at night. I just wish it did because I think that's cool. Finally, the actual price, it was actually about 35-40 bucks. Now the reason for that is because, as I mentioned, I had to buy extra wires. I needed different butt connectors. Luckily, I already had butt connectors laying around, so that was one thing. And 18 gauge wire at the auto parts store is pretty cheap, but that's definitely a con because I had to go out and buy more stuff, and it drove up the price. So these are the lights. Now the first thing I want to talk about is the included foam gaskets. As you guys can see, I did silicone the very bottom here, but the top part I didn't because I figured I should probably leave it so I can remove this in case I gotta change a bulb. But I am regretting that decision because, as you can see, there is moisture in here, which moisture and electronics don't mix, so I should definitely get on doing something about that. But this is an overview of how they look. They look great. They're actually really bright. They're not LEDs. They are regular old halogen bulbs, so they do draw a little bit more. And I'll just briefly explain how we measured. So we went to the center here. This is the center light. Then we measured evenly both ways. Then also, so we matched the curve of the truck. We measured evenly from this point here because, as you can see, the windshield curves. The lights curve with it. I just figured that would help it look the best, and that way it would look kind of factory that way. But I do love them. They look great. They're really bright, and I think it adds a nice touch. So the actual wiring for my cab lights is almost identical to the front LEDs I installed a little bit ago. Basically, for 12-volt power, run to one of these posts right here off the fuse box. It is grounded right down here at that blue connector. That's where the ground is for the switch. It runs behind the brake booster, through the firewall, up under the dash, and somewhere up there is the inline fuse. Now this is important. I mentioned in the last video in case there's a voltage problem, it'll protect the lights and everything, but that's up there to come out on top here to our switch. And then all of our lights are hidden behind this really beat up headliner. Basically, that light, it connects to the red wire. That red wire flows to the next light. That light connects to it, flows to the next one, all the way down to here. I ran it down this column, back through here behind the dash to the switch, because this switch actually kind of acts as like a relay, I guess. But the lights are actually individually grounded with their self-tapping screws to the roof. And this was actually the first electrical modification I've done to this truck. I mean, despite just tracing random wires and trying to figure out different electrical glitches, that was the extent of my knowledge. So installing these lights was entirely a learning process. I pretty much had no idea what I was doing. The whole install process definitely took longer than it should have. And one nice thing with vehicles is they have very simple wiring, relatively of course. The newer ones, there's so many cables, it's very complicated. But I mean, the principles of the electronics that they use, basically they use DC current, which stands for direct current. And this just basically needs one power cable and one ground cable. Very simple. Now something like your house uses alternating current. This is a much more complicated thing. I'm not exactly sure the differences in wiring and things like that. I just know that figuring out automotive wiring and wiring up lights to your automobile is much easier than wiring lights in your home. So if you do want to attempt a wiring project on your car, don't be intimidated. It's actually a lot simpler than it may seem. I bought these cab lights. It probably took me 6 or 8 months to get them put in because I was just dreading the wiring. So I was like, this is going to be very complicated. But it actually wasn't. I just kind of bit the bullet and did it and figured out that it's actually relatively easy. So the Harbor Freight cab lights, would I recommend them? Actually, yeah, I kind of would. They are great for the price. I mean, I personally love going to Harbor Freight and looking at random crap they have on the shelves. And I found these one day and I was like, heck yeah, I'm getting them. I'm putting them on my truck. And for what they cost, I could not be happier with the results. So if you want cheap cab lights that just work and kind of put your mind to a little bit more of a challenge because there's no diagram, then I definitely recommend checking out the Harbor Freight cab lights. But that's it for me, guys. Thank you all for watching the video. I will see you guys next time. Make sure to like, subscribe if you are new. Peace out.